This conference will now be recorded.
Good morning, everyone. Let's wait for a couple of more minutes and we'll get started. Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for, oops, can you all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, welcome to the class, everyone. And again, thank you so much for joining. So before we begin, I would like to take some time and see if you have any questions regarding this course. If you have not attended the demo, I would rather recommend that you first listen to the demo and then, maybe ask me any questions because most of the things are covered there. If you have attended demo and over the weekend you have some questions, you thought of some questions, please bring them forward. I'm here to address them. Any kind of questions about me, course, or anything else, career related?
Hi, I have a question regarding logging to AWS, etc. All those things you are going to cover. So I don't have to ask. You said that there is an account to be created, etc., etc. So all those things will be covered from today onwards. and I don't need to ask all those things right now. Is that correct?
Yes, we are going to cover how to create an AWS account, but yeah, I mean, I will not walk you through all the steps, but I'll tell you what needs to be done. Okay, meaning
Sure.
see, some of the things are, if some things are very, you know, fundamental, easy to understand, then I'll say, okay, you do this, you should be able to do this. Okay, otherwise, yeah, I'm going to walk
Yeah,
you
sounds
through
good.
those things. Yeah. All right. So before we proceed again, I'm going to repeat the same ground rules I laid on for the demo. One thing is, make sure you participate actively. I would recommend all of you joining from a laptop rather than from a iPad or a phone or a tablet. Okay, there's a reason behind it, because um, you know, whenever there is something you need to do or you need to check immediately, you could do it on a laptop. Though AWS and other services are easily accessible on iPad and other things also, but it's not so easy to always go and look on your iPad, whereas it's much easier to look on your laptop. Okay, so make sure that, and maybe my recommendation is keep a physical notebook also aside and start taking notes. This may not be useful for your later review, but when you write down something on a notepad, from my experience and also from what others told me, you tend to remember things longer. You tend to remember them better. Okay, so try to maintain some physical notebook and maybe also some notebook on your laptop also. Okay, and again, I don't mind people asking me questions while I was talking. So, I mean, if I'm in the middle of the sentence, let me complete it. But you can immediately interrupt whenever you get a chance and ask me about anything. If something doesn't make sense to you, or something needs to be re-explained, I'm more than happy to do that. So don't hesitate to interrupt me and ask questions. Okay, there at the end of the session, you can still ask me questions, but also while the session is going on, you, you could always feel free to stop me and ask a question about anything else. Okay, and another thing is, we've already discussed what's covered in the curriculum, but remember, we might not go in the same sequence. Okay, we might not go in that same order, because for us it's important to understand concepts and cover them. So I might jumble topics here and there, but we'll cover all of them. All right. All right, so before we proceed, let's understand a few things about IT infrastructure. Okay, before we understand even the cloud part, let's understand IT infrastructure, what is it's comprised of, and all that. Okay, so even before I start my presentation, or go through these slides, let me ask you some basic question, a very basic question. So when I type google.com in my browser, for instance, and I hit enter, before it loads the page, before the home page actually comes, do you know what happens?
So will it
From the
hit
time
the Google server?
okay,
It will hit the maybe the external server like load balancer or something,
mm-hmm,
and then it will be routed through the DMZ into whatever the URL is inside it,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
and then the whatever the data is retrieved, that is sent back.
Okay, but how does it know uh, what server to go to?
That's server things are done in the through the load balancer, whatever is the way of
Okay, 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 I get that. So let's suppose load balancer. You're right on that part. So, but how does it go to even the load balancer? Okay, yeah, you're right. You're right. You're right. But the
So
point
is
we're
that
trying to
in the DNS?
exactly, yes. So let's talk about that. Okay, so every time you enter google.com or wikipedia.org or any website or facebook.com, uh, your computers, your networks don't understand words or numbers. They understand letters. Remember, I told you that. So they are also we discuss. I mean, we might have all learned this in our primary school that everything is dealt in terms of numbers only in computers, right? You remember those lessons about bits, how computers communicate with each other
Zeros and ones?
using yeah, exactly, zeros and ones. So
Mhm.
zero is a pulse off, one means pulse on. Okay, so everything can be converted into ones and zeros. Okay, every word, every letter can be converted into ones and zeros and finally sent over the internet cables, right? So even within the computer also everything happens through ones and zeros only, the storage and everything. Okay, so so if you look at this one, there is this address called as google.com. So this is something human readable, what we humans understand. But for computers to understand, they need numerical values. They need something called as an IP address. Okay, just how you need a postal address to deliver your letter. Okay, the simple mail, you would need an IP address to reach out to that particular um, server to deliver you the content. Okay, to show you the content on your home on your browser. So to get this IP address, what should we do? What should your browser do, or what does it do? Okay, I'm not sure how many of you are born before 1990. How many of you are born before 1990?
Me? Tushar Sagi.
Okay, only 1% before 1990. Okay, I'm also born before 1990. But yeah,
And me also.
yeah. So you might have, some of us might have seen this book called as this big thick book called as Telephone Directory. Remember those yellow color pages with lots of names and phone numbers, right? So back in the day when there were no mobile phones, everyone has to go to BSNL, or whatever it was called back then, and apply for a telephone connection. So they will take at least a good six months to send you the phone, and also give you a mobile number. So when they do that, let's say you are Kurakalo Apparao, okay. So they will kind of assign a number in the telephone directory. I mean, they will already give you the number. You can share it with your friends via whatever means you have back then, like going to their home and telling them. And also in the telephone directory, which is a list of all the users, they also update your number, and these books are reprinted and published to everyone. So people used to buy them uh, once in every 6 months or once in every year to get the latest database of all the users in the city, in that particular city or in that particular district. Okay, so these are district wise telephone directories. So for a district, you will find all the phone numbers of all the people who had the government connections. Okay, you might be wondering what happens to the privacy, but back then it was the case. Today, Facebook and WhatsApp sell our data. Back then, it was officially sold out. Okay, so this person, I mean, this is how someone would reach out to you. So if there is another person, okay, Wankaila Rangarao, if he has to reach out to you, then he will open this telephone directory and go through all the numbers in alphabetical order, and he will stop at K and sees that, okay, this is the number I have to contact, and he would lift his phone and dial this number. Okay, so that's how it used to work back then. Okay, so this DNS is also very similar. When google.com bought their domain, see, google.com again, when they buy this one, they have to buy it from someone called a registrar. Okay, We'll talk about those things later. But yeah, there is a registrar called who sells the domain names. Okay, and these are all again managed by another company, another organization called as ICANN. ICANN stands for Internet Council for what is that? Internet Council for Addresses and Name, something like that. Okay, IANN and ICANN. You have both two institutions. Both of these are responsible to set up your these domain names, whether it should be .com, .in, or all these things. And also they have some other. There are registrars like GoDaddy and even AWS from where you can buy domain names. Okay, you can buy a domain name saying that okay, I registered this one. No one else can create a website with the name google.com or facebook.com or whatever it is. So when they buy a after buying the domain name, they also have to say where their servers are hosted, or in other words load balancer is hosted. We'll talk about load balancer in a minute, but they will give this something like this, just like your phone number, you have IP address, and they say they update this in the registrar database. So finally, it is also updated in the DNS servers. So when someone has to reach, they know that it is the IP address. But unlike our good old days where we referred to telephone directory manually, all this happens in a very small, in a fraction of microsecond through an automated manner called as DNS. What is that? DNS, domain name service. Okay. The function of the domain name service is to convert the domain names into IP addresses which can be understood by your machines. Okay, and these IP numbers, folks, can also be further converted into binary numbers like ones and zeros. Okay, we'll see that later. So the function of the DNS is to give you the IP address for a particular domain name. Okay. So how does this happen? We'll just take a brief look into that and we'll go to the next section. So let's say okay, let's say this is your laptop. Okay, so when you open any browser and enter address, or even on your mobile when you open an app and try to send a message or something, you know where the first point of contact is? Your router, right? Whenever you send any data, the first thing is it goes to your router. In case of mobile data, what happens? It goes to the nearest tower, right? That will act as your access point or tower. Okay, so the first point is your router. This is not good. Let's put these with the antennas, which sounds good. Okay, so even before it goes to the router, your browser asks itself, its cache, do I have the IP address for google.com? Okay, let's say you're accessing it for the first time on this laptop. First time you're opening Chrome and accessing google.com. So it says, no, I don't know. Then it goes to the router. Okay, and router says, sometimes most of the routers are also capable of storing the DNS entries, or what we call as caching them. Okay, you heard of this term cache? CACHE. You might have already heard of this term. So cache is nothing but to store frequently accessed data, okay, for a limited period of time, so that you don't have to do multiple hops to get frequently accessed data. Okay, so sometimes routers also cache this information. Let's say your router also hasn't cached that information. The next hop is, you know where the next request goes to? Your ISP. What's an ISP? Internet service provider, right? Okay, let's take any random picture. Okay, So it goes to your internet service provider. What is an internet service provider? It's someone who provides you internet, like Act or HighReach or Airtel in India. In the US, I think it's AT&T or Verizon and all these things, right? It reaches to ISP. So ISP has something called as domain name resolver. Okay, so it has something called as DNS resolver. It's a software, or it's a server which is running this DNS names, which has all the list of domains and the servers locally cached on it. So let's say, yeah, when you send a request, your ISP will query for the domain name in the ISP, okay, in the DNS resolver, and let's say it is not available here in the ISP. So next it goes to something known as a root server. Okay, what is this root server? I'll talk about it now. Just this one, some random example. Okay, so if you look at your domain name, it's always like this, right? Like mail.google.com, okay, or drive.google.com. Just talking about Google, but it- or simply facebook.com, or some cases it could be like this also, like google.com/news, for instance. Okay, so these are various ways in which your uh, website address could be formatted. But in each of these cases, there is something called as a hidden dot at the end of your address. Okay, not at the end of the address, at the end of your top level domain. Okay, like this. Even if it's like nic.gov.in, government website, or uh, fbi.gov in the US, in the case of US, or even if it's mit.edu. Edu is educational institutions, right? In all these cases, there is a hidden dot which we don't see, and your browser knows that. Okay, so it will never be seen, but it is always there. Okay, when you enter a website, there is a dot that represents nothing but the top level domain. I told you, right? When you have to buy these domains, you have to buy from a registrar like GoDaddy and all these people, or Namecheap. Okay, Cloudflare. All these people sell domain names, of course, and all these people, you know, stay in touch with ICANN, which is an organization. They say that okay, it's already, if someone has sold google.com, he will immediately update to ICANN, so someone else will not sell it to someone else for the same domain name is not sold out twice. Okay, so these people decide on the top level domains. What is the top level domains? For instance, .com is a top level domain, .org, .edu, .tech, okay, uh, .co.in, .co.uk, .com.au, you name it, right? We have all these things. We have .me, .website. Um, what else? What are the commonly used extensions these days? Okay, but we might have seen one or the other type of top level domain in our life. Okay, most of our websites are .com, which stands for commercial, org for organization like Wikipedia, edu for educational institutions like universities, tech for latest upcoming blogs, technologies. Okay, and you also have IO for all the technology related tools, websites. We are seeing IO at the end. Okay, uh, so these are the various level of top level domains. But to host all these informations, because you also need to have a database about what kind of top level domains you have. For that, we have something called as root server, okay, which is represented by dot in the case of domain names, or the website addresses. Okay, so this dot is nothing but the root server. Okay, so there are root servers to which your traffic first, your DNS request is sent here to find out where this IP address is. Okay, what is the IP address of google.com? So let's say root server says, no, I don't know where this is. You have to go to, but I know this is a .com server, so I know who might have the information. So he will send it to the .com servers. Okay, so we come to the .com servers. The .com server says, okay, I don't know the IP address, but I know where he brought this website from. So he'll send me to the registrar. Okay, registrar is someone who sold me the domain name. So here he sends me to registrar like GoDaddy or Namecheap or Big Rock. There are a lot of things who sell you domain. See, you'll get ads from GoDaddy, right? If you start a business in 10 minutes, start a website and all these things, right? So those people actually sell you the domain names. So if you start a shop tomorrow, okay, naming mywonderfulshop.com, my wonderful shop, and if you need a website, you need to go to one of these registrars and look for their website. Look for your website. For example, Freenom is one such site where you can freely we can find some free domains also for first 3 months. This is also a registrar. So here, if you would like to buy for, let's say I started a company called as KK Enterprises, for instance, I can look if that website is available or not. Okay, there is kkenterprises.tk, which is free, .ml, these things. Similarly, you have .com, but it is not available. Look at this one. It is already sold out. So .com, .garden, everything is sold out. You can see more. So someone has already brought it on their name. So you cannot buy it anymore. Okay. So all these KK Enterprises is very popular. So they are sold out. All that you're left is, see, these are all the top level domains I'm talking about. .international, .investments, .irish, .lol. Oh, that's great. You have a top level domain called as .lol and .love as well. Okay. All these things are sold out. How do I know? See, this is grayed out here. Okay. So yeah, but if suppose if it's available, you buy it from the registrar, right? And this registrar will keep the information about you and also your website. He should ideally have the IP address. But what people do is they don't manage their DNS records in this one. They say that we will manage our own DNS records. Okay, and they keep their own DNS servers either in cloud or in the same what do you call at the register only. It depends. Okay, sometimes you maintain your own DNS, sometimes you put it in the registrar. No matter what you do, even if you're maintaining your own DNS, there is some detail called as name servers which you need to upload in the registrar. Okay, in the registrar you have to say that, okay, if anyone comes for me, send it to this address. Okay, that you do here. So finally registrar says, okay, I don't have the exact IP address, but I know where this person is maintaining his record of IP addresses. I can send it to you. IP address, I will send it to you. So registrar will redirect to DNS. Now DNS says, okay, google.com, here is if you're wanting to reach to google.com, here's the IP address. He'll send it back to registrar, and registrar will store it in his own database for next time someone comes to him the next time. And also the top level domains, the TLDs, the .com or whatever it is, they will also store the information, cache the information. Okay, the root servers also will cache the information. The ISP will also cache the information. The router will also cache the information. Finally, your system or the browser will also be caching the system. So next time you're going to google.com, it's not going to go all this way to get the IP address. It is there right directly inside your laptop. Of course, next time someone is also accessing google.com from the mobile, from your home. Now what happens? The request first goes to router, and your router has already stored that information. So it's going to give that IP address to your mobile without actually going to all these ways. Okay, so it's very distributed. Or let's say someone else within your who is also using the same ISP as yours is also trying to reach to the same website. It need not go all this way because your ISP has already cached it, right? It has already stored it in its database. So for this user, he will come to his router, and from his router he will come to ISP, and this information is given to him immediately. All these steps are only to get the IP address. Okay, the page is even not loading. Your browser has just got the IP address where to load. Okay, So now you have the IP address. The next step is to go to that particular location. Okay, so this much you have to do just to get the IP address. But as I told you, DNS is very efficient and it happens in a fraction of seconds. Okay, so every one of these people have stored it in their databases. But what if Google updates the IP address, right? So Google, when it updates the IP address, again these people have to requery it. Okay, that's why there is a concept called as TTL, time to live. So if you create a DNS name, you also update the record called as TTL, how much time it has to live. You will give in some seconds, okay? You will say that 80,800 seconds. So that would be like how many hour days? 1 day, I guess. So after 1 day, what these things have to do is they have to again refresh and get the latest IP address. Okay, in that way you will never have stale IP address. Even if you have stale IP address, your systems are intelligent enough to go back and get the DNS. Okay, but just there might be a slight delay than the usual accessing. Okay, so this is what happens when you access a website or even before the page loads. The first thing is your server getting the IP address, okay, from the respective DNS servers. And these steps might not always happen. These happen only for a completely new website or something that is not accessed by anyone in the last 24 hours or 36 hours. But generally what happens, some of the other people already access it. Your ISP resolver might be constantly querying for the IPs and getting it and storing it. Most of the times your request will be served from here itself. The DNS request will be served here itself, or even some routers have the caching mechanism. Even if someone else from your home has accessed, you will also get that IP address real quick. Okay, it's a very distributed system and very good system, DNS. Okay, so this you need to understand as a fundamental part, and not only for your browser. Whenever you're accessing something on the mobile app as well. For example, when you're opening your HDFC account, HDFC net banking or Access net banking or whatever it is, you do the same things. You have to but here you're not putting any IP address because sorry, not putting any domain name on your mobile apps because it's already pre-coded into your app. Okay, but it has to do the DNS resolution to get the information about the servers. Okay, mobile apps are nothing but customized browsers serving a specific website. That's it, nothing more. All right, any questions so far on the DNS resolution part?
Hey, Kiran, just one question there. The last
Mhm.
DNS you showed there, right? So that's the
Mhm.
corresponding registrar's DNS. It's their DNS, right?
No. It's a DNS server maintained by the individual product website owner. For example, Google.com can maintain their own DNS. They can create their own DNS servers and run it, or they can use a cloud service like AWS has a service called as Route 53. Google.com also has Google Cloud Platform also has their own DNS service. So you can use a managed cloud service, or you can create your own DNS servers. Okay, so that makes it easy. And once you create a DNS entry for any of the websites, it will give you something called as name servers. You have to update those records in the registrar. So registrar will have the information where your DNS is located, and your DNS will have the exact IP address of your website. Okay, that's the difference here. Okay, and we will see this in action in the future classes. We'll see this in action, how we create a website. I'll create a free website using Freenom, or I have a couple of websites I already registered. I'll use them, and I'll update the DNS record in AWS, and I'll show you how to update in the registrar as well. Okay, so we got
Okay,
this covered. Yeah,
got it. Thank you.
yep. Okay, yeah. So most of, if you're a small website, you don't want to maintain all these things, you can simply just give your IP address to registrar. But if you're a complex website, using some automation to update your IP address regularly, okay, then you will use your custom DNS. Okay, all this time we did only one thing, getting the IP address. What happens next? I think it was I don't know who spoke earlier about load balancers. Is it Tushar?
Yes, I spoke about it.
Yeah. So just like Tushar said about the load balancers, we'll talk about that. Okay. Now my browser has got the IP address for google.com. Okay. You could also find it from your command prompt if you want the Google's IP address. Okay. Go to your command prompt. In case of Windows, you have to click on Start button and type in CMD. Okay. Just like see, if you type CMD, my system is little different because mine is a Linux machine. I have something called as console where I run my command line. So in your case, you have to run CMD and run this command same command like this, ping www.google.com, or simply google.com should also be fine. Okay, so when you do that, it's going to give you the IP address for your Google. Okay, so in your case, it's going to do it for 4 times and stop in Windows. In Linux, it's going to do it continuously. Still, I press Control C to stop it. Okay, so you clearly see this IP address. This is what your browser is also going to get, but it's not going to show us, of course, because it's happening behind the scenes. So when you do ping google.com, what happens? It gives you the IP address. Uh, in case of browser, it also gets the same information and uses that information to go to this particular location. Okay, so let's say uh, this is a server. Okay, before we go to this part, anyone knows what a server is?
Yes.
Yeah, go on. Please tell. Please answer. What is a server?
That is where all the processing takes place.
Okay, that's the characteristic of it. But what is a server?
It provides a service.
That's again a characteristic. That's the functionality. But what is a server?
It is a computing system of hardware and like hard disk and RAM, physical like in memory.
Exactly. So what is the simple term for that?
CPU,
Computer. Okay, it's a computer.
computer.
Yeah, server is nothing but a computer, folks. Like someone else answered, it definitely provides a specific service. Okay, like like a web server provides web pages. A mail server helps you to send and receive emails. And what's the other thing? Like a DNS server helps you to update your DNS entries. Uh, Similarly, a file server helps you to upload and download files. So server provides a specific functionality, and it also is a what's the other answer? Um, it has the computational ability, of course, and it's nothing but it's a computer. Okay, it's a computer, but these servers are physical devices that are specifically created to run 24/7 365 days. Okay, throughout the day, 365 days. If you run your laptop for 1 week, what happens? Your motherboard might as well burn. Okay, I mean, these days these are really the motherboards and the chips have really improved. There are people who never shut down their machines, even the home systems, and they still run, but they still cannot be run at the server level. Okay, they cannot accept so much traffic, and they cannot run that. And also they have additional features like they can be connected to two or more network connections at the same time. Okay, I told you in the demo, right? When you're creating some servers, you have to make sure you have at least 2 or 3 of them, so that others will always be able to access them even if one of them is down. And systems go down for whatever reason, software or hardware. Okay, let's say I got the IP address for Google, and okay, since I got the IP address, I go all the way. So IP address is like, as I told you, is like your postal address, your residential address. Like when you when you order something from Zomato, based on your address, he reaches to your home, right? So similarly, this is also like this. Once your browser has your IP address, it will come on. Okay, yeah. So let's say this is the IP address. This is that IP address. It will go to this particular server. Okay, this server is nothing but, as I told you, it's a computer which has an operating system, and within the on top of the operating system you install a software. Like, okay, web server generally, you have softwares like Apache. You might have heard this term. Okay, so if you talk about web servers, there are softwares like Apache, Nginx, or in Microsoft world you have IIS, Internet Information Services, Apache, Nginx, IIS, or sometimes you could also have a Tomcat server or something like that. So let's say it's running this software, okay, and let's also assume that this is a very powerful computer. Like this has about 1 terabyte of RAM and 100 cores of CPU. Okay, because it's Google, they have to handle a lot of load. So it can access multiple requests at the same time, coming from hundreds of thousands of users. Okay, this is cool. But as I told you, in IT world, it's a given that any system could go down at any time for whatever reasons. It could be hardware, network, or software. So this system might go out of, uh, the system might be inaccessible for some time due to some failure. Then what happens? Then your every users on the planet will have no google.com. They don't know how to Google, anything. Okay, I I have slight rash on my left leg. Is it corona? No one can Google all those stuff, right? That's what people do. So one server is down and entire google.com is down and everyone is panicking now. They don't know what to do. Okay, so this cannot be a very good setup if you want to create a application that is highly available. So what you need to do is you need to create at least two machines of the same type, so that everyone can, even if one, at least two. Okay, when I say at least two, that means not just two but more than two. So you create at least two web servers which are always running. Okay, maybe this need not be so high capacity. Okay, it can be just, or let's say, something like 48 GB and 16 cores of CPU. Okay, so we'll create multiple machines with the, okay, let's for simplicity just take two machines only right now. Okay, so but remember, every system has its own IP address. Okay, just like your home has an uh, service address, your IPs also will have different addresses. Okay, I mean your computers also will have different IP addresses. So in this case, let's say your IP address is, why am I not able to edit this one? Yeah, let's say it's 21, and these are most likely dynamically assigned. So you may not even have the control to give the next series from the previous one. Okay, so this has a different IP address. This has a different IP address. But remember, when you googled, when you typed google.com, you got only one DNS entry, right? You got only one DNS entry. So it's always going to this one. So what's the point of having a second one? Because the traffic is going to, and this will be same for everyone. Okay. So what's the point of having a DNS when every request is already going to the same server? Sorry, not DNS. What's the point of having a secondary server when every request is going to the same server? There's no point, right? So that's when you actually not give the IP address of your server, but you have something in front of these servers known as something already Tushar told us, that is called a load balancer, right? So you will have another server in front of your these two servers. Okay, the work of this server is only one thing: to receive traffic and send traffic to other machines, or whatever machines you configure inside your load balancer information. Okay, this load balancer will receive, so this IP address will be not this one, maybe something else. But here, this will be your, whatever you update this IP address in your DNS record, and all the requests are coming to this particular device. Okay. All the requests are coming to this particular device, and this device will load balance. What does it mean? Load balance means it will send first request to this computer or this server, and second request to the second server. Okay, in this way it's always sending traffic to these two these two servers. Even if one of the server is down due to whatever reasons, technical reasons or whatever, you still have one server and all the traffic will be sent to the same server. But in the meantime, what happens? You will get alerts and everything. When I say you, the Google folks will get alerts saying that one of the servers has gone offline due to whatever reasons. So please troubleshoot. So they will come and troubleshoot and bring the server off online, or they would in fact replace a new server or whatever they want to do, they will do. Okay. So again, they will connect this new server to the load balancer, and your load balancer is still sending data to these two servers. Okay. So this is good, but every time you send a request, first, whenever you type google.com, the first thing you get is a simple web page, right? But these days Google can do a lot more than simply showing a web page or results. For example, if I want to get let's say I want to buy some fancy stuff on alibaba.com, which is available for $117. I want to convert that into INR. I can open my calculator and do, but I'm too lazy. But if you see, it's showing it you instantly, right? It's showing you real rather instantly. So it says 117 USD is 8,472.26 Indian rupees. So this means there is some calculation that has been done. Okay. It's not a simple static web page. I typed something, and based on my query, it has shown me some result, and it has also shown me the exchange rate graph for the last 1 week or last 30 days, I guess, whatever it is. Okay, so it's also showing me this graph of how the exchange rate is happening between India and Indian currency and USD, US dollar. Okay, so this is all some intelligence, right? There is some business logic behind this. So for that, what you need to do is, apart from simple web server, which is your Apache or Nginx, you also need to have a program, some code running in the backend. Okay, so you can run the same application here as well. Here it is running, let's say it's running a Linux operating system. On top of Linux operating system, it's running, let's say, Apache. This is also running the same operating system, same version of web software. Web service software, but web service only renders a static web page. It cannot do dynamic calculation and all these things. For that, you need to have some application, maybe which is written in Java or Golang or Python. So you need to have another set of server which runs that business logic. Okay, and here also again, to maintain high availability, you will create at least 2 machines. Okay, so these 2 machines will do the business mathematics. So my first request goes to the google.com web servers, and they will give me the web pages. But inside the, when I enter another query which needs to do some business calculation, your web server, what it does is, okay, it also has an internal load balancer. It knows that if it has to reach out to a web server, app server, it has to send the request to this load balancer. It is this information will be uploaded to the configuration files here. So this load balancer, again, like any load balancer, will distribute the load, come on, between these 2 servers. So either of this server, based on their availability and all that, it will answer your question. Okay. Okay. So this is how your application servers are there. Okay. Application servers are nothing but servers which do some computational activity. Web servers and app servers, they are nothing but they're softwares. Okay, based on the software you're running, it becomes either a web server or an app server. Okay, sometimes you can run both the softwares on the same servers, but it's not recommended, because one type of service will eat away all the other resources. Then that might not be a good choice. So you will keep separate set of servers specifically to do the business calculations, or what we call as an app server. Okay, app servers are those which do the business processing. These are also sometimes called as middleware or something. Okay. Okay, this is cool. But sometimes you also need to keep a data of all these records, right? Like when I say data, um, database of all these records. For example, if I want to look for uh, some movie name, okay, I want to look for the Godfather movie and all the records. Okay. So when I type Godfather, it gives me a lot of details from YouTube, from Britannica.com, Facebook, everywhere it gives me a lot of results, and also it throws me some images and all these things. So it has to store all this information somewhere, right? It's a search engine, I know, and all these are links to some other websites, but even these links have to be stored somewhere. And that storage place we generally call as, what do we call it? A database server, right? So then you need another set of servers, okay, which are known as database servers. So next layer is a set of database servers. So here also same thing happens. Either your, come on, sorry, this is not responding. What's wrong with this one? Okay, anyway, just understand that this is also connected to your load balancer. Okay, and this will either send ask information from one of these two servers. Okay, on a very simplistic basis, for any production grade application, you have at least 2 or 3 sets of servers known as, this one is known as web tier, this is known as your app tier, this is known as your database tier. Okay, so this kind of setup we call it as 3-tier architecture. Okay, so where you have a web, an app, and a database layer, database tier. Okay, so this is called as a 3-tier architecture, where you have different set of servers to serve different purposes. Sometimes what happens is your web and app are served by same set of servers. For instance, Tomcat service, Tomcat, which is a software again, can be both a web server and also a app server. It can show you the web pages. It can also do the operations in the backend. Sometimes you might run Nginx here and some PHP or Python application here. So both of them are different layers. Okay. So sometimes only 2 layers combined with the user are known as 3-tier, but sometimes you could have web, app, and database, and these things are called as a, this setup is called as a 3-tier architecture. And I told you, right, systems could go down. So uh, what if these two servers are gone? Very rare. They cannot go. They both will not go down at the same time. But that's also a possibility. But we will talk about those scenarios. But what about this machine? This is also a server. We are saying this is also a server. And what if this goes down? If this goes down, everything goes down for a toss, right? Because you reach to this IP address from your DNS and it is not working. Then what happens? You will see page not found, right? So these things are not actually virtual servers. Like these things are special network devices called as load balancers. Okay, load balancer can be run on a physical server as well, or on a server on a computer as well, like Nginx reverse proxy or HA proxy. But there are specific networking devices which can do this load balancing. These things look like your routers only. Okay, these things look like your router only. uh, they are plugged to your computer device, other devices. Okay, so these routers are much highly available because these are mini computers running, you know, right? Your router also has an operating system. It's also a Linux based operating system, but very minimalistic, right? Very minimalistic. It doesn't have all the, you know, graphical user interfaces and all these things. You can also access your browser on your own. Sorry, you can access your router through your browser. You know that, right? If you go to 192.168.0.1, most likely this should be your router IP address, 198.168.0.1. It should show you a router homepage, or sometimes it could be 192.168.1.1. On your browser, if you type this information, it will show you your router information. Okay. So similarly, this is also accessible on a IP address, which you can configure and say that you have to send traffic to these two interfaces. So instead of these things, you have these special networking devices known as routers. Okay, these are highly available in the sense they will rarely go down, but they will also go down. There might be a chance that they will also go down, but very rare chance. That's why we use these things instead of servers. Okay, so this is how your application typically, any web application, a simple web application I'm talking about, simple web service, or simple uh, website works. You have these three tiers. Okay, and this person who is requesting the information is known as a client. Okay, and these things are called as a server. Okay, so any questions so far? All right, so if you set up, no matter how simple your website, if you want to available it to the public, as I told you, you will have at least four servers, two set of servers running your database, and two set of servers running your either application or a DB server. If you run with only one machine, it's always not highly available. They might go down. Okay. Okay, so tomorrow we'll talk more about the three-tier and N-tier architecture, and we'll talk about IT architecture in a brief, and then we'll talk about networks. Okay, how do we divide into networks? And also we'll talk about creating AWS account tomorrow. All right. So what is this called as? This is called as a three-tier architecture. But this is only as I told you, very basic setup. Something like Facebook and Google have many more tiers, many more layers. We'll talk about that tomorrow. But a simple website can have these kind of setup. And these are physical machines, but these days from physical machines we'll go back to, we use virtual machines. We'll cover that topic also later when we come to EC2. All right, if you do not have any questions, I'll take your leave, and we'll talk to you all tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.